Okay, so let's talk about sharpening with stones. So this is going to be the most aggressive form of sharpening that we've talked about so far. The thing I like about using hand stones is the amount of control that you have. If you run a knife through a machine, you just don't have that much control. You don't have control over the angle. You don't have control over how much the machine is actually removing, and where you may need a little bit more extra pressure, a little bit more extra grinding. With a hand stone, it's a very, very controlled process. I know that there are a lot of people in culinary schools or restaurants who may be intimidated by using a sharpening stone, but it's actually pretty easy. I would say it's easier than riding a bicycle. It does take some practice. It may take you a week or two with a little bit of practice to be able to get the technique down, but once you do, you own it. It is kind of like riding a bicycle in that once you know it, you just don't forget it, and it's easy to go back to the stones. So this is my my go-to as far as keeping my knives sharp and tuned up. Now, what I'm going to use today are these stones that ZWILLING has put together. These are glass back stones that are made by a company in Japan that's called Naniwa, and I think they're the finest water stones in the world. And typically, with a water stone, a professional stone is a good almost 2 inches thick. And these are quite thin, as you can tell. We put the glass on the back for one that we can put the logo on there, which is kind of nice, but you can also have the rating of the stone, the grit size, if you will. So this is a 5,000 grit stone. And so the glass gives the stone some strength, but it also protects this label so that you can always know it's a 5,000 grit stone. And honestly, I've had these stones, I've had this very set of stones for probably 7 years now. And you can see that they're not terribly worn. It's true, I don't use them every day at work, but I do use them quite often to sharpen my knives at home. And if we go on vacation or something, I'll take these same stones and use them if we go to a rental house and you know, have to tune up the knives there. So the point of that is these stones are beautifully engineered in that they give you great feedback, and feedback is the feeling that you get through the knife as you're using the stone. And also, most importantly, they don't wear very quickly. Some of the stones that are out of the market are quite soft, and as you're using them, particularly the coarser stone, like the 400 grit stone, they'll begin to dish out. And it's important that you keep the stones flat. So I've got the 3 stones that are out of the sharpening kit, and the coarsest stone is a 400 grit. And then we jump to a 1,000 grit and finish off on a 5,000 grit. And then we go to a strop to finish them off. And honestly, with these 3 stones, you can make the knife sharp enough to shave with. And, you know, if you wanted, you could just use one of these stones. You don't actually have to go through all 3. But by going through all 3, you can actually bring the edge up to a mirror polish and make it that razor shaveable sharp. So let me just start with a 400 grit stone. Now, one of the things that's super nice about these stones is that you don't need to soak them very long. And one of the ways you can tell if you have a splash and go, which is what they call this stone, as opposed to a soaker stone. So if I put a soaker stone in here, you'd see that there's just bubbles that continue to come out of the stone as the stone fills up with water. There's pores in between all the granules, and so that stone actually needs to absorb a bunch of water. As you can see with this stone, there's a few bubbles coming out of it, but for the most part, these are splash and goes. You put a little bit of water on them and they're ready to go. The water is important in that it acts as a lubricant, and it also acts as a flush for the metal particles and some of the abrasive that's breaking down the metal as it's coming off the knife and the abrasive as you're using the stone. And so that'll help to wash it away. The other part of the kit is this sink bridge. So this holds the stone in place, and it's designed to change, you can change the size of it, you can change the length of it, so that you can fit it over your sink, and then you can sharpen right over the sink and rinse the stones off, and then the slurry will come off and you can rinse that down the sink. Or it's got these rubber feet on it that you can stick it on the table. Personally, I don't like to sharpen right on a tabletop because I do want some water on the stone, and then it gets on the table and it's just kind of a mess. If you use something like this Pyrex baking dish, or like a brownie pan or a roast pan, you can stretch the sink bridge out so that it fits over the pan, and then the pan is just on a dampened kitchen towel so that it stays in place. So it's really stuck to the tabletop so that this isn't going to move, because you're going to be moving back and forth on this. And so the goal with these 3 stones is to reestablish an edge on a knife. So I'm going to use my little chalkboard here, and let's. I'm gonna rip the edge off of this knife and bring it down to something that looks kind of like that in cross section. So for us to sharpen this is the edge in cross section. For us to sharpen that, we need to remove material from either side of that to recreate a new edge. And all of this part we're going to remove with a 400 grit stone until we recreate an edge. And the reason I know that I'm done with the 400 grit stone is I can feel something that's called a wire edge, a beard, or a burr. And what happens is we've got this rounded, worn out edge that's no longer sharp, and we need to shave off or abrade or grind off material from either side until we form 2 planes that intersect. And when they intersect, there's a little bit of material that hangs onto the blade, and that's called the wire edge or the beard. And you can see it, it's quite fine, and you kind of need to know what to look for, but you can also feel it with your thumb. And so I've got a knife here. I don't know, I haven't checked it, how sharp it is, but I'm going to do my paper test to kind of check it out. So first I'll do the push cut. Clearly it doesn't want to do that. So now I'll try the sliding cut, and it slide cuts pretty well. So I know it's moderately dull. It won't do the push cut, but it'll do the slide cut. So that's good. I could probably just start on the 1,000 grit stone and then go to the 5,000 grit stone. But to show you how quickly an edge will come back with a set of stones and the proper technique, I'm going to take this, this rock that I pulled out of the garden and just kind of destroy the edge to make it in a condition that hopefully your knives would never get in. So we'll go back to the test, the same push cut, slide cut test. We knew it didn't push cut very well before. Definitely it's not going to push cut now, and it won't slide cut. So we've got a really dull knife. Now this knife would still cut. If I had a carrot, it's thin enough that I could actually push it through the carrot, but it's sort of crushing the food as it's going through, and I want something that's going to cut cleanly and leave that really nice polished surface on either side. So my 400 grit stone is nice and wet, ready to go. I'm going to use that same 10 to 15 degree angle. So if I lay this on the stone, that's the angle that I want to encounter the stone with. And sometimes I'll even go a little bit lower than 10 degrees. And it's the same as with honing. We want 4 to 6 pounds of pressure. Now, this case, I've made the knife really dull. I know how dull it is because I just ran it over that garden rock. So I'm probably going to use a little bit more pressure, maybe like 8 to 10 pounds of pressure, because I know how dull it is. If I had sharpened it like it was just a few minutes ago, I could go with the 4 to 6 pounds of pressure. So I'm going to keep the knife in my right hand. I don't switch hands from right to left when I'm sharpening because I have more control with my right hand. I'm going to use my left hand and put it onto the blade to balance out the pressure. If I just use one hand, it would be hard to control. Second hand gives me a little bit more control and allows me to distribute the pressure evenly. And I don't count how many strokes. I just use this long slicing motion. Now, you can do any pattern. If you want to do a figure 8, if that feels good, that's cool. If you only want to go backwards, that's fine. If you want to go straight back and forth, and then move the knife over and go straight back and forth, that's fine too. This feels comfortable for me, and I can get the whole length of the edge, and I can use the whole surface of the stone. I don't want to just stay in the center, because that'll wear my stone more severely, and then I'll get this little hoopty in the center. I want the whole stone to wear evenly if possible. So this sweeping action works well for me. And I'll do maybe 10 or 15 strokes on that side, and then flip the knife over and do 10 or 15 strokes on this side. Now, the only way I know I'm done with the first stone, and this is really important, this is super critical, is to feel for the wire edge. And I'm going to feel for it like this, not like this. This won't tell me if I have a wire edge. I have to feel this way and this way. And right now, both sides feel completely smooth. So I know I don't have that wire yet. So just go back to the stone, same pressure, 8 to 10 pounds of pressure, and make this sweeping stroke. Now, I rinse the knife off a little bit in the water so that I'm not feeling the grit. The grit can be somewhat deceptive. And I can feel the wire edge now right here. And generally it shows up here first before it shows up on the tip and the heel. If I feel the heel, it's just barely coming up. And the tip, this needs a little bit more work. So I'll just concentrate here. Again, trying to use the full surface of the stone. Rinse off the grit, and then feel for that wire edge. And I can feel it on the tip now too. So now I just want some balancing strokes to go to make sure that the wire edge is nice and even, the full length of the blade. And once I can feel the wire edge the full length, I know that those two planes, this material on either side has been removed, and I've established a new edge. Now this edge is going to be rough. If we look at it from the side, it's going to have a bunch of teeth, and plus it's got that wire edge hanging on there. So it's not going to cut that well. It'll do a sliding cut because it's got all those little teeth. But it definitely will not do a push cut because it's quite rough, but it'll slide cut. And if you listen, it sounds like a little saw. It sounds like tearing paper. And if you look really close, you can see that the paper's fuzzy or kind of fibrous because it's a tearing cut. So we're done with the first stone, and the wire edge is key. That's absolutely important that you get the wire edge before you jump off the first stone. So this first stone and this first process, and maybe you have a knife that is really in need of sharpening, it's going to take some work. It's going to take some time. It may take a lot longer than what I just demonstrated. This is a really nice piece of steel. It's ground really thin, so there's not a ton of material that you have to remove. But be patient on the first stone. It may take much longer than you had expected, but your key to getting off the first stone is to feel that wire edge. And you know, your wrist might get a little bit sore. I've been doing this for a long time, so holding that bevel angle and having good control of the knife is almost second nature for me to be able to do that. So just be patient with yourself. Wait until you get that nice wire edge and take your time. You know, speed is not the key to this technique at all. It's the consistent angle and the good amount of pressure. Control is most important, and the speed will come with practice. So I'm done with the first stone because I can feel that wire edge. So I'm going to put that aside. And now I go to the second grit stone, which is a 1,000 grit stone. And there are times when my knives will get a little bit dull. They're not super dull, and I'll just start with the 1,000 grit stone. So I'm going to put a little bit of water on this. I usually wipe the water off my hands just so I don't have water on my hands, so I got good control of the knife. Same thing, same angle, 10 degrees, 8 to 10 pounds of pressure. Now the secondary stone is much easier because the geometry is already established. And so it's this scratch pattern on the side that we're trying to refine. This stone is about 2 times finer than the first stone. So the scratch pattern on either side and the edge is going to be much finer. But same pressure, same angle. The second stone goes much, much, much faster because the heavy lifting, the heavy work, the heavy grinding has all been accomplished with the first stone. Couple balancing strokes here at the end. Get the grit off the knife. And I'm ready for the third stone. Now this, it's not necessary to do all 3 stones. You could just do 1 stone and then go to the strop. You could do the 400 grit stone and go to the strop. But with each stone, the edge becomes more and more refined. The teeth on the edge of the knife get closer together and smaller, and therefore the edge becomes stronger and closer to a mirror polish. So I get rid of the 1,000 grit stone, and now I have a 5,000 grit stone. Now this is a really fine stone. Stones do go up to like 15,000 or 30,000 grit. For kitchen work, I actually think 5 is as fine as you need to go, as long as it's followed up with a strop. This will give you a really nice polished edge. Now on some of these stones, as you get finer, you can see there's metal particles that have been left behind by the last time I sharpened this. And the way to get rid of that is with this cleaner stone that's included. So put a little water on the stone as a lubricant. Here's the cleaner stone. And I just cut a couple of grooves in my cleaner stone. And these don't, generally they wear very, very slowly, but they do wear out over time. Put a little water on this. And just think of this stone as an eraser. Basically, I'm just going to clean up this stone and get rid of the metal particles that have been left behind, because they're actually loading the face of the stone. So imagine you've got the face of the stone, then I sharpened with a knife last time I sharpened, and it left a deposit of metal particles on the top. So now there's metal particles between my knife blade and the stone itself, or the abrasive nature of the stone, and I want to get rid of the metal particles so I can just get to the cutting action of the stone. I want to make sure that there's no grit from the previous stone so I don't contaminate the stone. And then it's the same pressure and the same angle as before. And you can hear the stone is much, much, much finer. It's much quieter. Almost feels like a piece of glass. And this metal particle that's been left behind, if I want to keep the stone clean, I can just come in with the cleaner stone and it comes right off. Now, you can leave this slurry on the surface of the stone and it acts as a polishing agent. And you can go either way. You can rinse that off if you like, or you can leave it there. So the third stone, like the second stone, you don't have to stay on here very long because most of the work has been done by the 2 previous stones. And again, a couple of balancing strokes. I'm going to get the grit off. Now, even though this stone is so fine, this 5,000 grit stone is so fine, there's still a wire edge here. There's still a little metal particles that are clinging to the edge of the knife. And I don't think the camera could actually pick it up because it's so fine. But because those metal particles are on there, this knife at this point will not do a push cut, but it'll do a slide cut. And I'm not sure if you can hear the difference, but it's a much quieter cut than it was with the 400 grit stone. So the last piece of this, the last thing to do to really make sure this edge is as sharp as it can be, is to strop the knife. And stropping is what the barber used to do. He used to have that strop by the side of the barber's chair, and it's when barbers used to use straight razors to shave. And they would strop that edge because the razor is a super fine, thin piece of metal. And just by rubbing it on a piece of leather that was charged with a real fine abrasive, he could sharpen the razor to the point where it gave you a nice, clean, effortless shave. So what we've got here is a block of wood and a really nice piece of leather. And there's no abrasive on here. So essentially what the leather does is, as I draw the knife across here backwards, so I don't want to cut the leather, so I'm going to go the opposite direction as I did with the stones. As I draw that knife backwards, the leather somewhat will conform to the shape of the edge and actually polish off the wire edge. So I'm going to just move this over a little bit. Make sure it's nice and dry here. So remember, you want to go backwards. If I go forward into this block, as I did with the stones, it'll cut the leather. So I'm going to go backwards. Again, 10 to 15 degrees. You can choose whatever you want in there. And then that same amount of pressure. And you can do several strokes on one side. Again, speed is not important. The pressure and the angle are much more important. And this is polishing the wire edge off. It's just kind of the finishing touches of sharpening. Now, it's not quite a mirror edge, but it's a pretty nice finish. And if that worked, and I've actually polished off the wire edge, I should be able to just set the knife down, and under its own weight, it can cut through the paper. And that's the push cut that I'm looking for. That's what I'm looking for. Is as soon as I set this on the paper, it begins to bite in and want to cut through without sliding. And this, I think, is the strongest edge for a kitchen situation. And this is the strongest, most durable edge. And as it degrades over time, as you use the cutting board, as you're cutting through food and you notice the performance begin to dip a little bit, that's when you want to grab your sharpening steel, either your two-sided steel, and use the smooth side first. Or if you have a ceramic, go ahead and use the ceramic, and that should bring the edge back into alignment and get you back to working as quickly as possible. And if you do this regularly, if you stay on top of your knife, this doesn't take long at all. Maybe 5 minutes a knife at most, and you're back to shaveable sharp, and you should be able to get a couple of months or at least a couple of weeks if you're working in a restaurant before you may have to hit the stones again. So there are lots of different machines out there that are made to sharpen knives. There's the V pull-through sharpener, there's the electric sharpeners, and all of these have their place. Hand sharpening is not for everybody. It definitely is a skill. It takes a little while to learn how to do it. But frankly, I think it gives absolutely the most control and absolutely the nicest edge you can put on your knife. If you've invested in some nice cutlery, take a little bit of time, learn how to do this, and you'll really be able to take care of your knives for a long time. If this is not an option for you, the pull-through sharpener is definitely going to make your knife sharper than it was before and get you back cooking. Maybe save you a trip to the sharpener for a couple of months. There's nothing wrong with going that route. So you just have to find the sharpening method that suits your lifestyle.